can't just leave them behind.
It was surprising that the ferry company commander took all the troublemaker squad members, who were now platoon members, with him. If Enkrid hadn't seen the empty quarters, he wouldn't have believed it. Kreis, who had been away from the barracks for several days, likely didn't know. That's probably why he asked for Ragna to be called.
How did I avoid getting dragged along on the expedition?
Enkrid wondered if he had used the excuse of joining later since he stayed behind. Or perhaps the ferry company commander had left Kreis behind as a favor. In any case, Kreis remained, and the squad members were gone. Enkrid would have to rescue them alone. He couldn't just summon the squad members who were already on the battlefield. Using the reserve unit of the border guard for an internal matter of the Gilpin Guild?
Not a chance.
As if they would help. Yeah, maybe if there was someone worth relying on, like the ferry company commander. Even if she stayed behind, it would be a gamble. What about Torres? As a platoon leader of the border guard, it might be difficult, but personally, he might be able to help. The border guard is also about to head out, except for a few. Enkrid mused. Allowing him a day off after reporting back was the unit's way of looking after him. Did that mean they gained a lot from this mission? Enkrid shook his head lightly. His mind was filled with random thoughts. Just do what needs to be done. Here, what needs to be done is…
We're going to save Kreis. Yes, that Big Eyes.
He said, stroking Esther, who nestled against his chest. Seeing Esther's puzzled look, he repeated that Big Eyes was a friend. It was a goal spoken out loud without thinking. Hearing this, Esther looked at Enkrid with eyes as blue as a lake. Enkrid looked back at Esther with similarly colored eyes.
Why?
Esther wasn't going to answer. What could a panther say, however? It seemed like Esther's gaze was questioning whether saving Kreis was really the only reason.
For other reasons, too.
Enkrid revealed a part of his thoughts, the lycanthropes, the Greyhound unit of Aspen, and even the wizards. He wanted to test his skills against Torres and Finn on the way there. The desire boiled over fiercely. Where do I stand now? What is my state? How far does my sword reach?
How much have I improved?
He didn't know. He had no sense of it. That's how it was. You have to know to see, but every day was new for Enkrid. He was an explorer discovering new lands every day, always a pathfinder blazing new trails, a climber scaling mountains for the first time, a hunter in uncharted territories. He moved forward by looking at the signposts, but he didn't know where he stood. That's why, when he heard about the frog's appearance, he coldly assessed his condition and took a full day's rest, because he thought that he had found someone who could help him check his position relative to the signposts.
Will my sword be effective?
Last time he encountered a frog, getting hit once made his ribs cry out in weakness. How will it go this time? Not all frogs are the same, but still, there's no better opponent to compare myself against. If he fails, the frog will become the wall that blocks today. But that's fine. It was fine. If any of the squad members were here, this wouldn't be happening. That's why Enkrid had no choice but to step up. Is it ironic, or should he say it's lucky? Or maybe it's just bad luck. Bad luck has always been like a constant companion trailing behind. It's up to the swimmer in the river of misfortune to navigate through it. Thinking of Rem and the other squad members, Enkrid realized how narrow his view of the world had been.
It's laughable.
There was a time he considered his squad members to be above average soldiers. Above average? Laughable. It was a ridiculous notion. None of the squad members fit within the soldier ranking system. Now he knew that. In reality, if even one squad member were here, there'd be no reason to fear a mere frog.
But now I am alone.
He couldn't abandon Kreis, nor did he want to retreat. With his left foot, he recalled the days he faced Rem. With his right foot, he reflected on what he learned from Jackson. Again, with his left foot, he remembered Odin. With his right foot, he embodied Ragna. Each step he took, he recalled everything he had learned. Countless instructors repeated drills today. Facing a frog didn't scare him. Was this the harmony of the heart of the beast? A sense of calm, boldness, and even a thrill of challenge arose within him. Enkrid's pupils flickered like flames. Esther hit his chest with her front paw, as if to say not yet.
I know.
Enkrid responded and kept walking. Soon arriving at the mansion, the bald Gilpin was waiting.
Where the drawing room? Where is the drawing room again?
Following Gilpin's lead, Enkrid entered the mansion and stopped in front of the door to the drawing room.
Am I charging in here ready to die?
Or was he just mad with a thirst for challenge? He didn't know. The answer lay beyond the door. Esther jumped off his chest and bounced to the side. Watching her, Enkrid wondered, will he be someone I can talk to? The fact that Christ was kept alive suggested it might be, but regardless, it was a situation where he needed to assert control first. If you're here to fight, you fight. What's the point of talking? Enkrid took a short breath, deciding to speak through action rather than words. With a bang, he kicked the door open, rolled forward, and threw his right hand forward as if tossing something. A whistling dagger shot through the air, folding space with terrifying speed. A sharp whistle followed. Almost as if anticipating it, Frog's arm moved like a flash of light. Is this guy crazy? Sensing a presence, then bloodlust. After the stabbing intent came the attack. There was no hesitation. It was as if the action had been planned before reaching the door. Frog saw the arm of the guy move, who kicked the door open. Seeing the flying blade, Frog drew his weapon and deflected it. To an ordinary person, this would have seemed like an incredible feat, but not to Frog. He deftly knocked the whistling dagger away with the flat of his blade. The dagger embedded itself into a crude leather decoration on the wall. The man who threw the dagger charged in, drawing his sword. With a satisfying ring, the sword came down in a bold arc. Frog hooked his fingers into a loop attached to the handle of his weapon. Frog's slippery skin prevented him from gripping weapons properly, so he had a weapon made with a loop, called a loop sword. By hooking his fingers into the loop and closing his grip, Frog's 3 round fingertips met his palm. All he had to do next was swing. The clash of metal announced the start of the fight. Soon swords and daggers danced, orchestrating a fierce symphony. The sound of clashing blades filled the room. Sparks flew in the air, accompanied by a relentless barrage of strikes. Frog, impressed by his opponent who blocked his attacks over 30 times and occasionally countered, thought, "This guy's interesting." Christ sat in a corner. He wasn't tied up or injured, but escape was impossible. Though it had only been 2 days, Frog exhibited remarkable stamina. He barely slept and always kept watch. Crace could handle his needs and even shared meals with Frog. But escaping was a different matter.
What would happen if I ran?
Everyone left in the guild would be killed. If caught, he would end up as a lifeless corpse alongside the others. Frog was capable of such things. Spring had come, and Frog had arrived earlier than expected. Kreis had some hope, believing that if 1 or 2 squad members arrived, they could handle the situation. Anyone but the squad leader, he thought. When the door opened, Kreis hoped. When he recognized who entered, he was disappointed. Now, he stood with his mouth agape, unable to close it.
What is this?
The continuous noise sounded like the drawing room would collapse. What he saw were trajectories, paths of blades, something created by the blades, only sparks flew between them. What's going on? The one who entered was the squad leader, but that squad leader was
Fighting Frog?
It didn't look like he was losing, at least not to Kreis. Enkrid, watching the opponent's weapon that seemed to bend, positioned his sword sideways. The impact traveled up his forearm, spreading through his body. It would be foolish to just try to endure it with brute strength. He redirected the force, mixing in the correct sword technique. What seemed impossible before was now feasible. He deflected the blade sideways and thrust his sword forward. The blade sliced through the air with a whistle. Frog retaliated, swinging his sword down again. Enkrid blocked, deflected, and dodged. How was this possible? It was thanks to his experience fighting the wizard's thorny vines. Countless experiences had shaped Enkrid's swordsmanship, allowing him to swing, dodge, and block effectively. The foundation was defense, blocking again and again. The opponent's weapon resembled a hunting knife with a wide blade, a typical weapon for frogs. The loop sword often took this form. It was unusually heavy, and the opponent wielded it with the finesse of a lighter sword, thanks to Frog's exceptional strength. Enkrid lost himself in the swordplay, focusing solely on the swords. The lines connecting points, the lines bending and descending like lightning. Frog's weapon struck like lightning, and Enkrid intercepted it with his sword. Unable to deflect it, his knee bent halfway. In that bent position, he smoothly swung his sword forward. Frog took a half step back and stabbed with his blade. A thrust with a wide blade, a non-standard move. Yet Enkrid felt the thrust like a sharp awl. His senses danced on the blade's edge. His already keen senses had become sharper thanks to Jackson's training. In this world where only the swords, himself, and the opponent existed, he lost track of time, blocking again, striking, thrusting, and slashing whenever an opening appeared. He mixed in techniques from the Valen mercenary sword technique, feigning a slash, then stopping to thrust. This swordsmanship had become second nature to him, perhaps an evolved form of his earlier style. Frog deflected most attacks with brute strength, thanks to his strength far exceeding that of a human. His physical capabilities and reflexes played a significant role. Clang! Thwack! Smack! Some attacks were dodged, others deflected. Blades grazed cheeks and Frog's fists struck armor. As Enkrid deflected a punch and aimed his sword at Frog's heart, Frog spun half a turn to avoid it. A bubbling growl came from Frog's throat, full of excitement. Enkrid uttered no battle cry. He was solely focused, completely absorbed in one thing.
Don't scatter.
Concentrate, gather focus. He avoided attacks not by watching the sword, but by feeling the blade's presence. As these moments continued, Enkrid entered a new state of awareness. Noticing Frog's fingers hooked on the loop, the trembling of his broad feet, and the movement of the violent muscles beneath his slippery skin. His hands moved, his arms extended, his feet shifted, and his body twisted accordingly. In that moment of heightened concentration, forgetting points and the lines they formed, Enkrid saw a glimpse of the outcome of the ongoing battle. It might have been just a passing thought, but because he saw, he knew. Sensing it, Enkrid knew that his chance of victory lay there. He acted on it. All this time he'd aimed for Frog's heart whenever there was an opening. Now, it was no different. This thrust, filled with the determination to pierce through, shot like a beam of light through space. Frog stepped back with his right foot, dodging the attack. The blade scraped against the hard armor. Seeing this, Frog's cheeks puffed up.
Trying to get my heart.
Unable to hold back, Frog's blade descended toward Enkrid's neck faster than before. It was a lightning-fast strike, a split-second opportunity. Enkrid withdrew his thrusting sword. The two swords that had been in a continuous exchange clashed in mid-air and stopped.
Are you trying to fight me with strength? Foolish human.
Frog growled like a beast. Enkrid responded not with words but by reenacting what he had envisioned.
Like this.
He created softness by slightly bending his knees while standing still. Mixing the correct sword technique with the gentle sword technique, he absorbed the opponent's force. Frog's sword, driven by brute strength, seemed poised to split Enkrid from the forehead down.
You damn fool, Captain!
Chrysa's shout echoed, but both ignored it. Enkrid put all his strength into pushing Frog's blade away. With a tingling sound, Enkrid's sword raced along the blade. Frog, who had been pressing down with sheer strength, faltered. Reflexively, Frog blocked the blow aimed at his heart with his right forearm, the one holding the sword. Aiming for the heart would have been another futile strike. So Enkrid's sword traced a smooth arc. He aimed for Frog's left arm. Though Frog dodged, blood spurted out. The arm wasn't completely severed. The blade had cut through Frog's slippery skin. As Frog's puffed-up cheeks indicated, he wasn't just going to stand there and take it. The broad blade, deflected away, was brought down again. Enkrid blocked it with his raised right hand. The blade struck the gauntlet he had taken from the sewer wizard. With a loud crack and a sharp grinding sound, the blade was deflected to the side. The gauntlet's exterior was cut and slashed, but his wrist remained intact. It was a combination of the parrying technique learned from Audin and the durable gauntlet.
You crazy bastard.
Frog said, his left arm dangled, and even with his regenerative ability, this wasn't enjoyable. Frog glared with a fierce look, blood still pouring.
Ah.
Enkrid sensed the end of today. His right wrist was too weak to hold his sword, and he had to catch it with his left hand. How many more moves could he endure, he didn't know. But he was somewhat satisfied with the last strike. A strike that created an opening by aiming for the heart. It was truly well executed. Frog, a species known for discerning talent, felt uneasy about Enkrid. Why? Because he had exceptional talent? No, it was because he was an unfamiliar type. This one had to be killed. He had to die. Frog wondered how this human who seemed at his limit could pull off such a move, repeatedly feigning attacks on his heart, only to take his left arm in the end. In that brief moment, the human had bent his knees to absorb the weight, and then scraped the ground with his feet to push forward. He had staked everything on a single move, and Frog had been the one caught off guard. If his opponent's right wrist were intact,
Would I have lost this fight?
Frog's cheeks puffed even more. He had to kill him. His sword rose. It was the moment that would end everything. Enkrid remained calm. Frog found this attitude even more irritating. For just a moment.
It was visible.
The method to capture Frog, the way to kill, the path to victory. As words were carved on the milestone and the path appeared before his eyes. Could today be another satisfying day? He had rested well, maintaining a perfect state in preparation for the repetitive day. Now, all he had to do was die and start the day again. But Frog's sword did not fall. The killing intent and aura were still there. Yet the blade did not move. It stopped abruptly in the air, as if someone had grabbed it. Frog puffed up and deflated his cheeks repeatedly.
Why?
In Enkrid's gaze, Frog's unseen gaze, behind the human who had cut off his arm, there was a panther with eyes like a blue lake panther. In some regions, they were considered sacred beings and were sometimes revered as guardian spirits. But Frog wasn't the type to care about such things. To them, a beast was just a beast. In other words, it wasn't the mere gaze of the lake panther that had stopped him.
Damn it.
Frog cursed inwardly. Instead of sweating, his smooth skin secreted a mucus-like substance. This was a physical change in Frog's body due to tension. Frog, with a white scar on his neck, had a lot of experience, including dealing with wizards. Wizards, those strange beings who bring the world of spells into reality, they were always troublesome to deal with. From the lake panther's black skin and eyes, such an aura could be felt. Countless experiences, the marks of mana visible through the eyes of a talent detector. That panther itself was either using magic or was at least connected to it somehow. Frog had an intuition. If he struck now, he could kill this man.
But I would also have to risk my life.
The magical panther wasn't the only problem. The human sitting in front of him wasn't easy either. Constantly aiming for the heart, swinging his sword towards the arm, the last move. The sword, blade, will, and aura running along his broad blade. It wasn't a simple action. He moved his feet to add weight and momentarily showed strength similar to his own. Compared to himself, he was of smaller stature. The conclusion, the quality of his muscles was exceptional. And then,
Those eyes.
the gaze wasn't dead. Even now, the eyes directed at him were full of aura. How could he be like that with no chance of winning? It felt like looking at something forged from sheer willpower, not relying on the magical panther behind him, just burning with pure aura.
Crazy bastard.
Frog's cheeks puffed up even more. He didn't like this situation at all. In his mind, he pulled out a scale to weigh the options. Should he risk his life to kill this man here? Or should he leave it for another day? He desperately wanted to kill. This was the kind of person who needed to die, but if his own life was at stake on the other side of the scale, he had to reconsider. The gaze of the talent detector scrutinized Enkrid. He calculated carefully. Fighting when he wanted to fight, eating when he wanted to eat, and loving when he wanted to love was Frog's specialty. But his life was at stake, and he was bound by obligations in this place. Was it worth risking his life and ignoring his duties to kill? The weight on the scale tilted to one side. There wasn't much to reconsider. The importance of this city, the border fortress city called Border Guard, wasn't that high. Soon Frog's puffed cheeks deflated. The blade, poised to strike, was lowered. The aura faded.
Limit.
Frog judged. It would be difficult for the human in front of him to become more skilled than he was now. Good muscle quality, momentary strength comparable to Frog's own. The swordsmanship and individual tactics were excellent, and an unyielding spirit felt like something he had never seen before. Despite this, Frog instinctively knew.
Half of it was luck.
Though his arm had been cut in the last move, he had also shattered the opponent's right wrist. It meant the opponent's maneuver was reliant on luck. He would kill him the next time they met. If they met again, he could do it.
Don't forget, human, my name is Maelrun.
That was the end. The aura vanished completely, and Frog retreated. Maelrun met eyes with Esther behind Enkrid.
I'm just leaving, so you should step back too.
He shot a look with that meaning. Esther did not react, just gazing with eyes like a calm lake. Maelrun picked up his cloak from the ground and retreated. Frog walked leisurely out of the mansion and no one stopped him. Some guild members looked uncertain.
Don't just stand there, everyone move aside. Our guest is leaving.
Kreis intervened. Even with one arm unusable, Frog was still Frog, and so Frog left. Esther, thanks to the grimoire that Enkrid had brought, found a trick to release the shackles on her body. While she couldn't return to being human immediately, she could still manifest parts of the magical world, even in her panther form.
Of course, it would be a bit of a struggle each time.
She would have to use up the mana she had stored, and a part of the magical world could be contaminated. It was a method from the grimoire of that madman who built his magical world using corpses. It was a trick among tricks. Still,
Someday I'll use it.
it would be useful to know, so she had familiarized herself with it, and that time could be now. Esther feigned calmness, revealing her presence. She made Frog aware that she was a wizard. If you strike that blade, I'll pierce something into your heart as well. What is will? Will can also become mana. For a moment, Esther made herself appear not as a panther, but as Wizard Esther. That was the result. The guy named Maelrun, or whatever he was called, retreated. Had Esther's body been intact, things might have been different. In her current state, even if she and Enkrid both went all out, the odds were only 50-50. It was a conclusion reached after weighing all factors. So why did the opponent retreat now?
Lucky.
That was the only judgment she could make. Had Enkrid's skills improved dramatically? It surprised Esther. She was quite amazed too. But it wasn't enough of a reason for Frog to retreat. Of course, the situation had twisted before she could attribute it to luck. That situation had been created by the man who stayed by her side out of necessity.
Left arm.
Not the heart, but the arm. Had he kept aiming for the heart and then retreated, that guy might have continued to endure. But he had half severed the left arm. At that point, it might be faster to cut it off and let it regrow than to reattach it. A swordsman with one arm gone, he became a more manageable opponent.
Damn it.
How did it come to this? Esther sighed and gave a light pat on the back of the guy who had nearly wasted all the mana she had accumulated. Why wasn't he waking up?
Enkrid,
Enkrid, barely holding on, began to retch. Esther quickly jumped back, and Kreis approached.
Are you okay? No, but what's going on with finding Ragna? Did you understand what I was saying?
After vomiting once, Enkrid seemed to feel a bit better and raised his upper body, speaking.
You've been cooped up here for 6 days without even going on a mission, and you don't know where your squad is? Are you the guy handling the information? You?
It wasn't a scolding tone, just a matter-of-fact statement.
Huh?
Kreis then realized what he had missed. Thinking back, the squad members were faces he would see every day. He had heard about the deployment, but who would take the squad without Enkrid? Unless it was a commander who wanted a hole in the back of their head, a superior killer, a lazy navigator, a soldier who disappears without a word, and a religious fanatic who can't fight without divine permission. Who would take such an unusual bunch? He had assumed they'd stay behind, waiting for their platoon leader. That was a mistake.
They're not here. They've all been deployed. That's unexpected. So it's just you and the platoon leader, Esther?
Yeah.
Kreis put his hand under Enkrid's arm to help him up.
Are you badly injured?
Other than my right hand, it's manageable.
As he spoke, Enkrid realized he was in better shape than he thought. Then a question arose.
Why did he just leave?
He could have killed both him and Kreis with a single slash.
Why?
Enkrid's gaze turned to the panther, Esther.
What did you do? Really, the opponent was Frog?
He was acutely aware of the weight the name Frog carried. What could that small young panther have done? He didn't know. It was all a mystery. Esther, sensing his gaze, spoke as if scolding him. It seemed like she was saying,
is that all it takes to bring you down?
Enkrid took a deep breath, trying to gather his thoughts.
I don't know.
Dwelling on the unknown wouldn't provide answers. Of course not. Enkrid knew from experience that some things just remain unknown. Instead, he decided to be satisfied with the experience gained and the drive to continue forward.
It worked.
What could he call it? For a moment, he felt like he had overwhelmed Frog. He had drawn Frog into the situation he orchestrated and struck. He had cut the arm, not the heart. It would regenerate. It would surely regenerate. But not while fighting him. If he had avoided targeting the right wrist at the last moment,
If that had happened.
the outcome of the fight could have been different. There would be much to learn from this encounter. With these thoughts, Enkrid made his way back to his quarters. Kreis supported him, and Esther, rather than jumping into his arms, glanced back and then walked alongside him. Just as they were about to rest after arriving at the quarters,
Where have you been?
it was the company commander, the superior officer of platoon leader Vengeance. Sweat was dripping from the commander's forehead as if he had been looking for Enkrid himself. It wasn't typical for a company commander to be running around like a messenger. As Enkrid thought about this and was about to salute,
Immediately. Prepare for deployment.
the commander spoke first.
I've been slightly injured.
Enkrid wanted to rest for a day or two if possible. His presence or absence on the battlefield wouldn't make much difference, he thought. After all, he was just a recently returned platoon leader-level soldier. He thought perhaps they might show him some leniency.
What? How did that happen?
The commander likely already knew he had returned unharmed from the operation.
I got into a scuffle with a thug.
In such times, what were you thinking?
The commander scolded him but shook his head, as if understanding the situation couldn't be helped.
We don't need your swordsmanship right now. So if you can move, we would appreciate it if you could go immediately.
The commander wasn't forcing him. It was more of a request. To Enkrid, it sounded like something urgent had happened at the front.
Why?
Enkrid still hadn't been briefed on the current situation on the battlefield. He had done nothing but rest for a day after returning, and today he had been returning from a sword fight with Frog.
Ranger Finn is set to accompany you. Can you depart immediately?
What situation is so urgent?
Kreis, who had been listening quietly, expressed his confusion. The company commander, who seemed familiar, spoke more openly.
Well, if we don't bring their platoon leader, they won't continue fighting.
The commander trailed off, but Enkrid quickly understood.
You mean my platoon members?
It's essentially a deployment to persuade them. They've requested that you just stay at the battlefield, even if you rest at the rear. It's a request from your direct company commander.
It seemed like he had to go. There wasn't time to rest just because his wrist was a bit sore. He could still hold a sword.
Rem.
Enkrid felt concerned as soon as he heard the explanation. He figured he could learn about the battlefield situation on the way. A few scratches could be treated with some ointment, and then he could go.
Understood.
Enkrid saluted, indicating that he would depart immediately.
Today's quota is done.
It was the third day since the deployment. The skirmish that started with a light provocation was the beginning. Rem had been on the battlefield for 3 days straight, returning in the same condition each time. He swung his axes, splattering blood on the ground. Every time Rem went out, he killed exactly 3 people. His powerful axe strikes made those 3 look like chopped wood. Living logs, split open and spilling brains and entrails. At the start, when our forces and the enemy clashed, he would swiftly slash, chop, and crush heads before returning. If seeing that didn't make a commander salivate, they weren't cut out for the job. At the very least, anyone with an eye for talent wouldn't want to lose someone like him, and Rem wasn't the only one like that.
I can handle it alone, so why do they keep assigning soldiers to me?
Ragnar, a soldier dragging his feet as if bored, was the same. At first, he didn't stand out at all. He barely engaged in fighting, just holding his ground enough to come back alive. Unless someone attacked him, he didn't put his life on the line in battle.
What a waste of skill.
The ferry company commander was one of the few who recognized Ragnar's talent. She was just observing until one day, during a move between battlefields, Ragnar got lost.
How do you get lost here?
Had he tried to sneak through the mountains or cross the river to raid the enemy's base? All he did was push the enemy back. Anyway, Ragnar apparently wandered into enemy territory, which should have meant certain death, but he returned unscathed, casually carrying the head of the enemy commander.
Oh, I just felt like going left there.
That was all he said upon returning, the enemy commander's head dangling from his fingers.
You got lost?
Ragnar nodded. The ferry company commander asked and got her answer. That was the end of it. From the start, there had been no intention of forcing anything on them. They had been brought in under those conditions.
Fill in the vacant spot of your platoon leader.
To them, the name Enkrid was synonymous with magic.
Why are they telling us to fill a vacancy when they sent us?
If you sit around doing nothing, it would be because Enkrid told you to. Do you want to cause trouble for him?
With just a few words, those who had scoffed at the idea of deployment started packing their things.
I'll do exactly 3 a day, no more.
That was Rem.
All right, let's do it.
That was Ragnar, Jackson quietly nodded. by the calling of the gods. Even the zealot Auden moved. Andrew, Mac, and Henry were naturally expected to obey orders, so no more needed to be said. Kreis was on leave, having applied for a break. Andrew, with a black eye, seemed to welcome the battlefield, as did Mac, who had a black eye on the other side.
Battlefield, fighting, deployment.
Upon hearing the company commander's orders, they showed their excitement.
You're happy? You shouldn't be happy about this.
Seeing the two of them, Rem grinned. In that smile, the ferry company commander briefly saw a demon, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye. That's how these individuals had been brought together. Jackson and Auden's skills were similar to the others. Jackson put in just enough effort to appear serious, yet the enemy soldiers facing him couldn't even scratch him.
Why can't I just you wait?
The enemy soldier spat out such words, but Jackson didn't respond, treating it as if a passing dog had barked. He often returned from battle without killing the enemy or getting injured himself. Auden had only been on the battlefield once, and upon appearing, he broke an opponent's forearm with his bare hands. Even his allies, who witnessed it, felt a shiver down their spines. Breaking an arm? What was so impressive about that? However, the way he carefully grasped the opponent's wrist and snapped it like a thin twig was something else entirely. It seemed almost inhuman.
Shh, stay away, stay away.
How must that have looked to the enemy soldiers? Even allies found it unsettling. Auden, as a soldier, drew attention just by existing. He was smaller than a giant, but stood out among regular soldiers with his towering height and broad shoulders. How could he not be noticed?
Less than 10 of them, but their combat strength.
It felt as if his own abilities had multiplied tenfold. Simply calling them exceptional wasn't enough to describe them. Used correctly, they were a force that could harass the enemy beyond their numbers.
This must be why.
This was likely why they had survived despite various incidents and trouble. The ferry company commander, who had taken responsibility for bringing them, watched over them carefully. Just this much. This was the level of fighting they were permitted. So, what happens if they want more than they're allowed?
Backing off? Who said you could retreat first?
The new platoon leader didn't know anything. He was a recently joined commander. He didn't know about these people. He didn't know about the Troublemaker Squad, or REM, infamous for assaulting superiors, or Auden, who wouldn't hesitate to separate flesh and bone if it was God's will. He didn't know about Jackson, who exuded a silent menace. Ragna, who rarely got involved in anything, was also unfamiliar to him. It was Andrew who stood in front of the ignorant platoon leader. Rem already seemed to be in a very foul mood.
If this continues, there will be bloodshed.
If it ended with just bloodshed, that would be fortunate. Rem might split heads with his axe, one after another.
We are part of an independent platoon. Therefore, the operational command lies with our direct superior.
Andrew, who had now seen a bit of military life, responded according to protocol.
What? So, you're just going to stand back and watch?
The newly appointed platoon leader couldn't accept this, fighting half-heartedly and then retreating to loaf around in the barracks. Some are risking their lives, and others are slacking off. He couldn't tolerate such behavior, regardless of the independent platoon's status. As a superior officer, he couldn't just stand by and watch this happen. Andrew saw in the platoon leader's demeanor a reflection of his own earlier disregard for Enkrid. Back then, he had been utterly clueless. With a sigh, Andrew looked up at the sky, then lowered his head. There stood a man, resigned, having given up on something.
My name is Andrew Gardner, eldest son of the Gardner family. This unit is composed of nobility. Just get lost.
It wasn't something he believed. His expression was calm and resigned. It was hard to describe it as the look of an arrogant noble. Andrew couldn't be bothered to manage his expression. Mac approached silently and patted his back as if offering support.
Do you think being a noble means everything?
The platoon leader, lips twitching in the strange atmosphere, finally spoke up.
Well, I guess I'll have to see some guts then.
As Rem reacted to this, Andrew challenged the platoon leader to a duel. Andrew's quick move to knock the platoon leader down prevented Rem from swinging his axe. Instead, only Andrew ended up being beaten.
Nobility or not, this is the military.
The ferry company commander approached, reprimanding Andrew.
I will reflect on my actions.
He spoke, and the ferry company commander patted his shoulder, indicating she understood and that it was okay. The words were critical, but the gesture was reassuring. Andrew was often the one to calm Rem's murderous urges by becoming his sparring partner. Sometimes he had to deal with those who knew nothing and challenge them. As a result, the unit's morale was in shambles. Part of the reason was the so-called Mad Squadron. Of course, there were plenty of other reasons as well. The current position of the 1st Infantry Battalion was to the northeast of the border guard. They were stationed on a gravel field, with the Penhenil River on their left, and a few hills to the right that could be crossed within a day. Here and there, patches of grass were poking through the gravel, and near the riverbank, weeds grew as high as an adult's waist. On the Green Pearl Plains, part of the Night Order and the main army were engaged in a standoff with the enemy's main force. The role of the 1st Infantry Battalion of the Border Guard was to block enemy forces here. Their mission was to serve as a barrier, preventing any flanking maneuvers or independent detachments from the enemy. In a sense, their fate depended on the outcome of the main battle. If the Allies made the first move, they might deploy some of the Knights to sweep away the enemy here. Conversely, if the enemy gained the upper hand, they might face the enemy's Knight forces without any Knights of their own. Initially, this was the expectation. However, as both sides hesitated, this battlefront became a preliminary and vanguard battle. The infantry battalion and an independent company were evenly matched in terms of strength and conditions. Both main forces were stationed on the Green Pearl Plains, keeping an eye on this battlefield. So far, the Norillia forces had repeatedly been pushed back. There were rumors of giant soldiers among the enemy ranks. Some enemy soldiers had stood out, provocatively challenging any better fighters to come at them. All of this shook the morale of the Allied forces. In such a situation, what was needed was a variable, a game-changer to seize the upper hand. This variable was evident even to the battalion commander, the so-called Mad Squadron, undoubtedly the most conspicuous group.
If they just fight properly, it'll be enough. Do they have any demands? If we force them, they might just rebel.
The battalion commander was wise. He could see the state of the Mad Squadron at a glance. Although the ferry company commander had somehow brought them here, they were an uncontrollable force. If necessary, they could be crushed by force, but that was not the time for that.
The battle has only just begun.
Battalion Commander Marcus was a battle enthusiast, but he was no fool. Persuading them in a reasonable way would boost morale many times over compared to using force.
They need their platoon leader.
The ferry company commander answered, and the battalion commander gave his permission.
Bring him.
That was it. The platoon leader saluted and turned away. That morning, Rem had declared,
Bring back our platoon leader. I don't feel right fighting without knowing if he's alive or dead.
It sounded almost like a threat to stop killing 3 enemies a day if they didn't. A swift scout messenger was immediately dispatched. 3 days after the messenger left, platoon leader Enkrid stood before the company commander. The Mad Squadron had been brought to the rear to meet Enkrid. Thanks to that, they met after only 3 days.
If you returned, shouldn't you have come back right away? Didn't you want to see me?
The company commander joked in a typical fairy manner towards Enkrid. Seeing Enkrid's expression twist, she felt pleased. Seeing that scowling face eased the frustration she had felt dealing with Enkrid's troublemaker platoon members, who rarely listened.
Stubborn lot.
The company commander's gaze fell on Enkrid's right wrist.
Injured?
I got into a scuffle with some ruffians in the city.
Was that ruffian a frog?
At this comment, the gazes of Chryse and Esther, who had come along, fixed on the platoon leader. Enkrid remained indifferent. It must have been a joke.
It's not a serious injury.
The wrist wasn't broken. While there was some bone damage, it wasn't severe enough to prevent him from wielding a sword. It needed treatment, but it wasn't a serious wound. The time spent strengthening his wrist, using the isolation technique, had paid off.
In any case, welcome back.
The green-eyed company commander spoke. Enkrid saluted, and the company commander nodded in response.
Then go ahead.
Enkrid immediately headed to where his platoon members were gathered. He had wanted to go as soon as possible. Even though they caused trouble when he was around, the scale of the trouble they caused when he wasn't there was entirely different.
Should I quit?
At first, there were platoon leaders who would pick fights, but now even those were gone. Playing around with Andrew had become tiresome.
There's no real need for me to be here.
so he thought it was time to consider leaving. Rem wasn't thinking of an honorable discharge like others might. He could just disappear without a trace. The more time passed without Enkrid, the more this thought took hold.
If he doesn't come back today, I'm leaving.
Even so, Rem continued his routine. It was a repetitive, meaningless day. Even going out to battle had lost its appeal.
Die.
Boring. So boring. If you're going to kill, just quickly stab with your spear. Why bother shouting? It caused them to lose their breath and make their spear tips waver. Rem swung his axe vertically. The axe blade struck the spearhead. With that single blow, the enemy soldier's grip was torn, causing him to drop his spear. To lose one's weapon in the middle of a battle, this guy wasn't even a fraction of their platoon leader. Comparing them was an insult, a crime. The axe split the enemy's head. It was still a tedious task. He killed 3 men and returned. Days passed in a blend of boredom and weariness, and the thought of quitting emerged strongly in Rem's mind. This place was losing its meaning for him. With their move to the rear, there were no more battles. There was nothing left to do. Ragnar was in a similar state. He was listless above all else.
Is he dead?
Or why else was there no news? Without the platoon leader, everything seemed to revert to the way it was. He couldn't muster any motivation. Even feeling troubled was too much effort. Ragnar spent his time idly, doing everything half-heartedly. Except for the time he got lost and slaughtered about a dozen enemy soldiers, he did nothing. Audun prayed to his god, asking,
Is it time for me to return?
As always, his deity responded with silence, respecting his free will. With no answer, it was clear that the important thing was Audun's own decision.
Should I go back or should I stay?
Audun questioned himself, but still had not found an answer. Jackson had chosen to join the military with a purpose. Now that purpose was mostly fulfilled. Leaving would be easy. There was no need to waste time here. Thinking logically, it was unnecessary and meaningless. A series of such days, it was the epitome of inefficiency, something unthinkable under normal circumstances. So why was he still here?
Tonight.
Jackson decided he would leave. Of course, he had made the same decision for the past 3 days. On another day, as each squad member spent their time separately, as the sun set and darkness began to cast its shadow, someone entered the tent, now known as the Mad Squadron's tent.
I'm back.
A simple statement. It was always the same. Enkrid had returned. Everyone inside the tent fell silent. Only their gazes quietly exchanged. An unexpected person was the first to move.
Why are you so late?
Andrew, bursting into tears, ran to greet him. His bruised eyes were a testament to the hardships he'd endured. His crying fully conveyed his feelings. Enkrid looked at Andrew's face and couldn't help but smile.
Why is he faster than me? Anyway, you're back?
Behind Andrew, Rem's voice was heard. Behind him were Ragnar, Odin, and Jackson. In a corner, Mac and Henry were also present. All eyes were on Enkrid.
Yes, I'm back.
It was his report of return. The soldier who guided Enkrid to his quarters rubbed his eyes discreetly. It seemed like he had seen something wrong.
Is this real?
It didn't seem right. Maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him. As soon as the platoon leader appeared, a soldier named Ragnar stood up from his seat.
Why are you getting up all of a sudden?
Ragnar was known for hardly ever getting up. Even among the crazy members of the squad, he was considered the laziest. And yet here he was, rising up in an instant. Everyone who had been watching him, especially those who had seen him recently, would have stood up, slapping their thighs in disbelief.
What's with him?
He was the kind of guy who surprised people just by standing up. This guy, he was the lazy bastard who wouldn't get up. Even if they told him to get up, leave, or that enemy soldiers were attacking right in front of him until their ears were calloused from telling him so.
You're late.
Ragnar spat out the words as he grabbed his sword.
I need to check if I've deteriorated.
As if merely getting up wasn't enough, he was now proposing a spar. And he's the one suggesting it. Usually, harsh words would fly around within the squad, but this guy rarely acknowledged them. Yet here he was, suggesting a duel, gripping his sword like he was eager to fight, showing a stance that clearly indicated he wanted to swing his sword right away.
Are you crazy?
Rem, known as the laziest madman in the squad, stood in front of Ragnar.
You know the first duel is always mine, right? Isn't that right?
What was going on here? This was the guy simply known as the madman, the craziest in the squad, The madman who would swing his axe for no reason. The madman who would be the first to go berserk if provoked. And now this madman was smiling. It wasn't a mocking smile, nor one filled with malice. It was a pure smile. Combined with his savage features, it even made him seem innocent.
Are you hurt?
And he was even concerned about others. That crazy savage who was known for splitting heads with his axe could actually worry about others. The soldier was one of the battalion commander's direct subordinates. He had been tasked with guiding Enkrid, the new platoon leader, and assessing what kind of person he was. But the scene before his eyes was strange.
It doesn't seem like anything's broken.
He's speaking now too, so that guy does have a mouth. At one point he used to be friendly with most of the squad, but recently he had become a madman who did nothing but glare. He spoke so little that people wondered if he'd bitten his tongue off somewhere. His name was Jackson, right? They used to call him the madman with clear eyes. His clear, piercing gaze made people's skin crawl for no reason, leaving them feeling unnerved.
Did you apply ointment?
It was surprising to hear the madman with clear eyes. That guy speak, but he even went as far as to check the platoon leader's wrist.
This must be a dream.
Why had they changed so much? The last one was known as the Holy Madman. These four were already well known throughout the squad. Each was considered uniquely crazy. Among them, this person stood out the most. He had a build reminiscent of a large boulder, yet always walked around with a gentle smile. Most notably, unlike the other madmen, he was kind. Not that he was particularly obedient, though. Sometimes, when he was seen praying, it seemed as if a halo shone around him. He was the kind of soldier who, if he got involved, seemed capable of crushing an entire enemy squad with just a few blows, but claimed he couldn't fight because he hadn't received a call from the gods. This truly crazy person. In the deputy's view, this guy was the real madman. A priest who receives responses to their prayers demonstrates their divinity through holy power. But this guy didn't use holy power. So what did that mean? It meant his prayers went unanswered, and he wasn't a proper priest.
What divine message is that?
He would use the search for God as an excuse to shirk duties. Shouldn't he follow orders if he's in the military? If not, why was he here? The holy madman spoke with the same gentle smile as always.
Brother, you have lacked training. Have you been slacking off? You get injured because you're lazy. Train, train.
Regardless of his beliefs, this always friendly madman chided people with a smiling face.
The regular madman just giggles. The madman with clear eyes just stares at wrists with clear eyes. The lazy madman looks diligent. The holy madman scolds people.
What's going on? It was all so absurd, incredibly, utterly absurd. The only one who could make sense of this situation was this person. The deputy's gaze turned to Enkrid. He spoke calmly, regardless of what was happening around him.
It's not broken.
He glanced around and continued.
It's just a matter of resting a bit. But that's not the issue. What on earth happened? How did this squad become the madman squad instead of the troublemaker squad?
It's only been about 8 days. How did the troublemakers turn into madmen in that time? Enkrid's question was reasonable. Rem responded confidently, as usual.
I think it's because there was no platoon leader, so it's all the platoon leader's fault. It's all the platoon leader's fault.
The madman just spouted mad nonsense.
So about the duel?
The lazy madman responded to that.
Underestimating a minor injury can cause trouble at a crucial moment. Let's remove the bandage first. A madman? Who says that? I've never heard of it.
I don't know anything about that, squad leader.
Following that, the madman with clear eyes and the holy madman each offered their unique responses. The deputy had expected Enkrid to reprimand them harshly. Calling it the madman squad, regardless of the absence of a leader, seemed problematic. Above all, Andrew, who had stopped crying by now, was standing beside them. He's the squad member with the black eye. Those bruised eyes were evidence of trouble within the squad.
What happened to his eyes?
Sure enough, Enkrid questioned it.
He was sparring to improve his skills.
At the madman's response, Enkrid simply nodded.
That was well done.
Was this really well done? His comrade's eyes were bruised, swollen to the point where they could barely be seen.
But I will keep moving forward. I'll stay under the commander.
Even Andrew, who usually didn't even make a sound, seemed oddly different in Enkrid's presence. He used to just silently watch for cues, but now he seemed almost confrontational.
Yeah, that's why I like you. How about we have a round? Wait a moment, I'm gonna have some fun with our platoon leader first.
Rem's face was full of smiles. It looked like a happy smile, at least to the deputy. The deputy waited for Enkrid to scold the squad, talking about the madmen and whatnot.
Go and find out why I was called, why that lucky fellow is needed.
The deputy had taken it upon himself to guide the platoon leader, as per the battalion commander's orders, so he had to report whatever this man did, and he waited for Enkrid to take some action, but that was the end of it. The madman with clear eyes removed the bandage. A black panther, appearing out of nowhere, blinked its blue eyes and yawned. Enkrid looked at him intently, and then the other squad members also turned their gazes towards the deputy.
Aren't you leaving?
Enkrid asked. It didn't sound like an invitation to stay and chat.
Oh yes, I'm going. Have a good rest.
The deputy turned and left. After he left, Rem tilted his head and asked,
Why was he following us around? He kept rolling his eyes for days.
Eyes?
He kept staring. I thought he was asking me to kill him, so I was planning to decorate his head with an axe tomorrow.
You crazy bastard. That's not just assaulting a superior. That's murder.
Really?
He probably wasn't asking because he didn't know. Especially when he was smiling like that, it was clear he knew exactly what he was doing.
Just leave it alone. Don't cause trouble with the higher-ups, especially since that guy is directly under the battalion commander.
If things get bad, I'll just leave the military.
Of course, that wouldn't be a normal discharge. Rem's discharge would probably be more like a military escape with 2 axes. While Enkrid and Rem were conversing, Jackson knelt on one knee and began applying ointment to his wrist. A cool sensation spread across his wrist. It was cold, refreshing, and slightly itchy. A peculiar feeling. It didn't seem like a regular ointment. Maybe it felt that way, because it had been a while. Why was he so proactive about treating injuries? Regardless, Enkrid said what he needed to.
Let's try to align with what the higher-ups are saying.
The reason he was called in such a hurry had been made clear on the way over. The battlefront situation was deteriorating, morale was dropping, and there was unrest within the unit. The nickname Madman Squadron was evidence of this unrest. To raise the army's discipline by beheading these soldiers would be a waste of talent. But tolerating them and trying to manage the situation seemed likely to lead to more trouble.
The company commander must have protected them too.
The ferry company commander, whatever her thoughts, had subtly taken care of herself and his soldiers. Bringing his squad here was probably for a similar reason. He knew how much of a problem it would be if they refused to act without their platoon leader. So she brought them along. Separate from worrying about how she managed to bring them, Enkrid understood this much. Of course, Kreis had explained it to him along the way. The only problem was that these people wouldn't necessarily listen to him. They weren't the type to fight just because they were ordered to. Even now, none of them were paying attention to what Enkrid said. They ignored it completely. They had no intention of aligning with what the higher-ups said.
What can I do?
This was the Troublemaker squad, the Madmen's squad. Jackson, who had rebandaged the wrist, spoke with his eyes downcast.
You shouldn't overdo it, but you'll have to suffer the consequences later.
He knew they wouldn't listen, no matter what he said. Jackson stepped back.
Yeah, the suffering will be my burden.
As they finished speaking, Kreis, who had been standing behind them, finally spoke.
Am I invisible or something?
Huh? You're here?
Yeah, I saw you.
Ah, you've arrived, brother.
The 3, excluding Jackson, continued the conversation. Jackson only gave a subtle nod of acknowledgement. After all, he had some dealings with Kreis, mostly involving exchanging information, introducing prostitutes, and selling drugs. Kreis knew better than to expect much from these men, so he was content with what he got. Then, it was time for sparring. As they gathered outside the barracks, Enkrid finally spoke up.
It's intimidating just to say anything. In some ways, Andrew deserves respect for stepping up.
Enkrid's face was unscathed. He knew how to conduct himself well.
It also means this is as far as it goes.
He didn't have conflicts with anyone in the squad, but he also couldn't get close to any of them. Enkrid didn't judge people harshly, but he knew the judgment of his own soldiers. The fact that none of them kept Enkrid close meant they didn't expect him to pull his weight in the squad. Even so, he didn't tell anyone to go home or suggest they should leave the military. Who was he to say that? Even though everyone had told him to quit, he still held onto his sword. Yes, he hadn't given up, Not once had he backed down, he had crawled forward inch by inch. That was the current Enkrid. He had kept going. Even after injuring his wrist against the frog, he had shown something different, something accumulated over time. He felt he could do it again, as long as he didn't overstrain his wrist. It didn't seem too difficult.
I'm going first.
Rem stepped forward, smiling, and swung his axe. There was no warning. Enkrid swung his sword in response. Rem's arm moved like a whip, and the axe blade appeared to do the same, stretching and bending. Enkrid's sword curved to meet it. As they swung at high speed, afterimages trailed behind, and the axe blade and sword clashed. With one clash, one exchange of moves, that alone made the corner of Rem's mouth twist upward.
Well, look at that.
Rem muttered, and his smile deepened. The sound of metal clashing reverberated through the night, causing a stir around them.
What is it now? The madmen's squad again? What are they up to this time?
Upon realizing that the commotion was from the madmen's squad, the soldiers naturally gathered as spectators. It wasn't just the usual infighting. There was a new face, making it an interesting spectacle. Some people recognized that face. Like Vengeance, Bell from the previous battlefield, the squad leader who had stitched up Enkrid, some members of the border guard, and even those who had faced Enkrid in his promotion match. The sound of metal meeting metal, sparks flying, and the ensuing noise drew everyone's attention. They watched the sparring between Rem and Enkrid, and everyone was left speechless.
What is this?
Someone's muttering expressed the confusion of all the spectators. Enkrid. That Enkrid. Even though he had recently been promoted to high-ranking soldier, he was an opponent who had been significantly weaker than them. He was once the target of ridicule, called a fool of a squad leader. Clang, 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 clang. Now he was swinging his sword so fast it was almost invisible, parrying, thrusting, and clashing with Rem's axe. Rem, who had recently gained more renown by cutting down 10 enemies, even earning some admiration from their own side, was now evenly matched with Enkrid. At least, that's how it appeared to the onlookers. And it didn't end there.
Let's continue this conversation later. There are more waiting.
Rem stopped during the sparring. Behind him was Ragna. Behind Ragna was Auden. They each took turns fighting Enkrid, and Enkrid didn't easily yield to any of them. Rem and Enkrid sparred with high-speed sword strikes. With Ragna, it was a more subtle exchange of sword techniques. Auden and Enkrid exchanged hand-to-hand strikes and joint locks. Once the sparring session ended,
You've now taken your first steps.
Rem remarked. The term first steps might seem dismissive, but it wasn't. Rem's face showed a gentle smile, indicating satisfaction from Enkrid's perspective.
There's less wasted effort,
Ragna added. While it was hard to take this as a compliment, Ragna's usually half-open eyes now reflected unprecedented enthusiasm. Typically indifferent, Ragna was clearly pleased with the sparring, his eyes conveying a cold intensity.
You've been continuing your sensory training.
Jackson calmly complimented.
You've taken a step closer to the divine,
Auden said in a peculiar tone. After pondering over Auden's words, which felt off, Enkrid looked at him intently. Before Enkrid could respond, Rem spoke up.
Isn't that akin to praying for death?
He joked.
No, brother, it's a blessing,
Auden replied. Enkrid wasn't sure how it was a blessing, but regardless, the sparring had ended.
Is that the notorious squad leader? Now he's the crazy platoon leader. Get it right. What's going on here? That guy is that guy, huh? I heard he's a maniac about training.
Voices of onlookers who had been silent or shocked started murmuring. Enkrid, out of breath, felt his shoulders heaving, his wrist ached, and his tired limbs felt weak. Still, he wasn't in a bad mood, only…
It's a shame.
Everyone had gone easy on him due to his injured right wrist. That was a real shame. Even so, he had learned something. Reflecting on past experiences like climbing the walls of the cross guard and fighting Frog upon his return, he wanted to ponder over all these accumulated experiences and the new things he learned today. In short, he wanted to fight more.
Hold on. If you go any further, your wrist will be completely ruined.
Someone cautioned. Rem, quick-witted as always, spoke up. He knew the importance of resting. Hadn't Enkrid already learned and realized that long ago? Enkrid caught his breath and shrugged. The spectators began to disperse. Some acknowledged Enkrid with a nod or a word.
You're back?
It was Vengeance, the platoon leader. Now that they held the same rank, the conversation was more casual.
Yes.
Enkrid was actually a couple of years older, so the conversation flowed easily.
That's good.
Why did Vengeance seem somewhat embarrassed? After exchanging greetings with others, including Bell and a tailoring craftsman, Enkrid entered the barracks.
Now then, tell us what you've been up to.
Rem suddenly said. He was curious. What had Enkrid been doing to improve so much, considering he was known as someone who only relied on effort? Rem's comment about taking first steps was praise for breaking through a significant barrier. Though they had taken it easy on him due to his wrist injury, Rem noticed a clear change. Enkrid had shown a series of whip-like slashes, indicating a newfound confidence in his body, his weapon, and his accumulated skills. This was the difference between Enkrid before and after the scouting mission to the Cross Guard. Confidence and decisiveness. Some might call this experience. Others might say it's the embodiment of skill. Everything Enkrid had accumulated felt refined. Rem was eager to hear more about what Enkrid had been doing. Ragna, curious as well, sat down in front of Enkrid, followed by Jackson and Auden, who also took seats. Andrew, Mac, and Henry listened intently.
I feel like a storyteller.
Enkrid murmured, looking at his platoon members gathered around. A story? How hard could it be? Enkrid recounted the events plainly. He spoke of falling into a trap, the spearmen in front, archers behind, Ranger Finn's sharp observation skills, the lycanthrope, and the wizard waiting on the wall. He also mentioned fighting Frog. He honestly described everything, leaving out only the repetition of today's events, and added that luck played a part. It was a string of events that didn't match his calm tone.
Is there some curse that makes you better every time you're about to die?
Rem asked with a chuckle. It certainly seemed that way to him. Every time Enkrid faced a life-or-death situation, his skills noticeably improved. Was the platoon leader a genius? No, Rem knew that wasn't the case from personal experience teaching him. Perhaps the near-death experiences triggered something. Regardless, Rem found it curious how facing death seemed to enhance Enkrid's abilities, but he didn't dwell on it.
Anyway, it was fun,
he concluded. The others listening nodded in agreement. Andrew, with a look of disbelief, asked,
You survived and came back from such a place?
Could it really just be luck based on the stories they had just heard? The sparring earlier had also shown a significant difference in skill. Previously, he thought they were somewhat comparable, but now the gap seemed insurmountable. Had he neglected his training?
No, absolutely not.
Being around these crazy individuals, he had endured a constant struggle, and his skills had improved accordingly. Even Mac had mentioned,
But a road ahead, keep moving forward. As I hate to admit it, sparring with Rem does improve your skills.
Andrew felt he had given his all, more focused on training than ever before, yet a gap had emerged.
It was just luck,
Enkrid replied, as he always did. Andrew had no further words. Enkrid suggested they all go to bed while checking his wrist. It seemed worse than when he fought Frog.
Because of your wrist injury, you'll need to stay in the barracks tomorrow,
Jackson commented.
It's not severe enough to require the infirmary, but yes, fighting would be unwise.
You're telling me.
I also need some rest.
Enkrid added, starting a round of comments from Kreis, Rem, and Ragna. Enkrid anticipated this. His wrist was in worse shape, rest was necessary. If higher-ups questioned why he sparred with such an injury, Rem would probably reply,
It's a tradition in our platoon, didn't you know?
Regardless, rest was important, especially since his wrist had deteriorated after fighting Frog. He could wield a sword a few more times, but pushing it further would likely cause permanent injury.
Have you given up on the shield?
Ragna asked as he found his place. Enkrid nodded.
This feels more comfortable.
He showed his guard sword, which had some nicks and a dent in the blade, but was still serviceable.
Everyone has something that doesn't quite fit.
Ragna acknowledged with a nod. It was a night of reflection. As they all lay in their beds, Rem spoke up.
Let's not be outdone by Frog.
Didn't it feel odd to use such a thing with Frog?
That's true. We need more training, there's much to do.
Ragna added. Jackson gave a silent, cold glance.
Platoon leader with training, everything is possible.
Auden, with his silver tongue, added.
If we meet again, we'll win.
As Enkrid responded confidently, everyone chuckled.
You're quite confident.
Rem remarked on behalf of the group. As they settled into the darkness, ready to sleep, others spoke up.
When your wrist heals, let's have a proper go at it.
When it's fully healed, there's a lot I can teach you, like fixing some bad habits.
Training never truly ends, brother.
There is more to do.
From Rem to Jackson, everyone chimed in. Learning new things, progressing, and continually improving were what Enkrid longed for. For now, though, he had to focus on recovery. His wrist still felt stiff. It seems they don't want to send me into battle, he thought, feeling a bit strange about it. The people who cared about him were indeed peculiar. Regardless, if he wasn't going out tomorrow, maybe Rem and the others would fight a little harder in his stead. It was uncertain. Enkrid still didn't fully understand why they followed him so devotedly. He could only guess. He didn't want to push into the realm of certainty. Better to leave things as they were. If something needed to be said, they would speak up.
Let's do that.
Enkrid finally replied, truly trying to sleep this time. But then,
Anyway, about Frog. Rem said, half sitting up and mimicking sword strikes in the air. Block like this, strike like this, faster than him. Once your wrist heals, I'll drill this into your bones, how to kill frogs.
Beyond the standard technique, there's a process of learning new basic forms and integrating them.
Jackson added,
You should maintain the isolation technique, excluding the right hand, brother.
Auden advised.
And never let your guard down,
said Ragna. The entire platoon kept talking.
Are you guys not going to sleep?
Enkrid asked, sensing they could go on all night. Was it because they were happy to see him after a long time? Or did they have no one else to bother? Whatever the reason, Andrew's eyes seemed particularly lively.
I'm going to sleep. I was sleepy anyway.
Rem's words were the last before everyone settled down. Esther, who had been quietly hidden in a corner, snuggled into Enkrid's arms. As he lay there, he replayed the fight with Frog and today's sparring in his mind. The sparring had felt incomplete, yet it still excited him. It seemed like a process of validating what he had done so far, yet why did it feel like a new path was appearing before him? Reflecting on these thoughts, along with the warmth from Esther on his chest, Enkrid felt sleep overcome him and he drifted off. A short time later,
If it's my talent, it'll work anywhere,
he mumbled in his sleep. Andrew whispered in frustration, and Mac, overhearing him, found himself at a loss for words. By his standards, Andrew was an exceptional talent, showing visible improvement in skill. But in this platoon, the situation was different.
This is, well, quite something.
Where else could one find such people? Mac had never encountered a group of individuals who fought so well. Even the platoon leader, Enkrid, had shown remarkable improvement. He had always advised Andrew not to engage Enkrid, and now it seemed Enkrid had crossed a new threshold. Feeling short of words, Mac finally said,
Instead of comparing yourself to others, you should swing your sword one more time.
He spoke in line with the platoon's spirit of relentless training, which made Andrew sigh deeply. Morning came and Enkrid woke up.
Did I oversleep?
Esther was nuzzling against his chest. Instinctively, he reached out to pet her with his right hand, but then switched to his left due to the splint on his right wrist, rendering it unusable. He gently stroked Esther's fur with his left hand, and she purred contentedly. It seemed she had also overslept. Sunlight streamed through the barracks as Enkrid partially sat up. At the entrance, Kreis walked in.
You're awake!
I overslept.
After all you've been through, it's understandable. Taking a day or two to rest won't fully recover you from that ordeal, will it?
It was clear Kreis had heard about everything that happened to Enkrid. While Kreis knew his platoon leader had incredible stamina, not feeling fatigue after such a grueling journey would be inhuman.
Let's have some breakfast.
After quickly freshening up, Enkrid ate a meal. Breakfast consisted of well-cooked potatoes and thinly sliced, salted and grilled bacon.
The quality of the food is good,
Enkrid remarked.
They're taking good care of us in various ways. Oh, and the rest of the squad has already moved to the front lines.
Kreis mentioned, pointing upward. Does that mean there are high expectations for this platoon? Is that why they're getting special meals? Hearing that Rem and the others had moved out first, Enkrid wondered if that was good news or bad news. It seemed they were trying to move quickly, perhaps to give him an excuse to rest due to his wrist injury. But will his platoon members really act according to the commander's intentions? That was uncertain. Even direct encouragement didn't always work. Maybe they would fight hard for a day. Perhaps they would do so to let him rest. If Rem usually killed 3, today he might kill 5. That was as far as he could hope. But would they actually fight the battle their commander wanted? That was uncertain. He didn't know how much his platoon members were needed in the realm of strategy and tactics. That was as far as his thoughts went. He had never learned large-scale tactical operations. The commander would do his job. War-crazed Marcus, he would live up to his name. After finishing his meal, Enkrid trained using the isolation technique to avoid putting strain on his right wrist, then began reviewing his past fights. Reflecting and chewing over what he had learned was something he did every day.
Were there any mistakes?
If so, where? So as not to repeat the same mistake next time. Every experience from a life-or-death fight was a valuable asset. It was something an instructor had once told him in a small fishing village he had wandered into. That advice still stuck with Enkrid. As he reviewed his battles alone, he grew restless. Unable to stay still, he stood up, but with the splint and bandages on his right wrist, he couldn't grip his sword properly. Standing with his eyes half closed, Enkrid pictured the scenes in his mind. Audin, Ragna, Rem, reversing through yesterday's sparring sessions, passing through the fight with Frog, facing the wizard at night, the moments surrounded by lycanthropes, and the escape from elite soldiers.
Luck.
Luck had played a part. Since he had relied on luck repeatedly, one could say it was calculated luck. He continued thinking and moving his body. Soon his blood began to boil. He couldn't bear not swinging his sword.
A madman obsessed with training,
he thought. Who had called him that?
It might fit perfectly.
At the end of his idle thoughts, he couldn't resist and drew his sword. With his right hand injured, he used his left hand instead.
I've always fought with one hand.
Even with just one hand, he wondered how things would turn out if he increased his strength. He continued thinking, gripping the sword with his left hand and striking downward. It was a clumsy cut. He could feel it himself. It was so different from when he used his right hand.
It feels like starting over.
But it was many times better than staying still. He needed an outlet for the boiling enthusiasm, desire, and craving he felt right now.
Man, that guy's completely crazy. Injures his right hand and still goes at it with his left.
Vengeance, who was left to guard the rear, watched Enkrid from a distance and spoke. Of course, Enkrid didn't hear him. No, he didn't hear a thing. He was completely absorbed. Enkrid retraced the path he had taken with his right hand using his left hand, examining the things he had missed.